he's off today. So.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Litter Media Live. I'm your host, Mike Smith, and our special guest today is State Representative Brian Stewart, a Chillicothe native, but now living in Pickaway County and representing the Asheville area. We'll talk more with Brian here in a little bit, especially about the new state budget that the governor will be addressing as far as a signature or vetoes here in the next day or so. Our interview today brought to you by Litter Quality Propane. 92 years of serving propane users in southern and central Ohio. Reliable supply, reliable service, reliable people. Litter Quality Propane. Welcome to Brian Stewart. Good to see you again. Good
to be here, Mike. Thanks.
You've been busy here of late, getting the state budget, the biennial budget, ready to go. And there's so many things that are in that budget we don't have all the time in the world to talk about, but we wanted to try to hit on some of the highlights. So let's start with what the idea going in was as far as what the majority wanted to try to see accomplished.
Well, I think from the I get to be the chairman of the House Finance Committee, and so part of that job is we had 500 plus meetings between January and mid-May with members and advocates and organizations that have an interest in the budget. And I think the main thing that was clear from our caucus is we wanted to tackle property tax relief. We've had property taxes since 1835. It's a lot of the house has kind of been built on a lot of different layers there. But we've had these massive spikes in these 3-year reappraisal years. We've had just a growing concern that the increases in property taxes are outpacing inflation. And so that was a big focus for us, provide that kind of relief. We've done a lot of that in this budget. Our friends in the Senate kind of had to want to tackle the income tax side. And what I'm pleased with is we were able to do both. Mm-hmm. And so we've provided property tax relief, we've provided income tax relief, and yet we're still, taking care of all the essential government services that I think people expect.
In layman's terms, detail, if you could, the concept of the flat tax income tax.
So right now, the highest income tax rate in Ohio is 3.25%. You have certain rates as you go down the chain. We started out, I think, maybe a decade ago with 9 different income tax brackets. Wow. We're getting down to 1. Mm-hmm. And so simplicity, so the residents understand what their tax rate is, what they're going to pay. Our goal in the majority party is to reduce people's tax burden overall. Mm-hmm. And so everybody's going to get a tax cut by going to a flat tax here. But certainly when you bring that top rate from 3.25 down to 2.75, that's significant savings. Yeah. And, the floor debate was, that top rate, that's just for rich people. Well, a McDonald's, the average manager at McDonald's makes $66,000 a year in Ohio. The average teacher salary is $55,000 a year. An electrician is $45,000 a year. And so in our party, we don't believe that a teacher married to the manager of McDonald's is a couple of rich people that shouldn't be afforded tax relief. We think that couple deserves a tax break, and they're going to get it in this budget.
With, I think, the first year, which this goes into effect immediately, is 2026?
It will take effect 90 days after July 1st.
Okay, so it starts at 3.25%?
So the phase-in will be over 2 years, so that top rate will come down. I forget the breakdown between the 2 years, but by the end of the next year, by the end of 2027, that highest rate will now be 2.75, and that'll be the only rate that we apply.
We had one of your colleagues, Representative Mark Johnson, on some months back talking about the budget, and at that time there was some information being floated about that libraries, for example, were going to see a cut. He contended, no, they're actually seeing an increase. They're just not getting what the governor proposed. Is that correct?
That's generally correct. Yeah. I mean, in the House version of the budget, libraries actually got an increase in funding over the past 2-year biennium. Now, once it goes through the Senate, they made a couple of changes. But generally speaking, libraries are going to get as much or a little more than what they got in the previous biennium. There's been a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I think some disingenuous rhetoric on that score. All we've really done is say we're going to go back to treating the libraries like we treat everybody else in the budget, which is how much decide each 2 years how much we're going to spend and put the specific dollar amount in the line item. They had kind of like the property tax situation. They had a situation that where they were getting about 1.7% of the entire pie. Wow. No matter how big the pie was, no matter how big it went up in any given year. Now, certainly, I understand that that's some special treatment that folks might like to keep. Mm-hmm. But we need to get away from what I call autopilot appropriations. We should be deciding every 2 years what it makes sense to spend money on, not sort of carving out and saying, well, you get 5% and you get 2% and you get 3%, kind of heedless to what that actually amounts to.
In the same vein, concerning education, I think the release that your office sent that we used as our news story on littermedia.com, a record increase for school funding, although some are saying there's a cut.
Well, certainly not a cut. I mean, Mike, if my kid's allowance is $10 and they ask for 50, mm-hmm. and I say no, I can't afford 50, but how about we do 20? That's an increase in any mathematical formula that we would understand. Only in government do people have a different method for determining what increases and decreases are. Over the next 2 years, public schools are going to get an additional $600+ million in direct state aid compared to what they got in the past 2 years. That is an increase. Now, certainly advocates come in and say, we think it should be $1.8 billion, we think it should be $1.2 billion. That's when they actually give you a number at all, because most of the time the answer is just, it should be enough. It should be fully funded. Mm-hmm. Folks don't tell you what fully funded is. There's an insatiable appetite for government spending amongst some of these organizations. But look, we value our public schools. We also value school choice. We've been able to do both in this budget, and our public schools are going to get an increase.
Speaking of school choice, a court in Franklin County just recently ruled that the Ed Choice program, which allows state money to go to private schools, that's unconstitutional. Where do you think that's going to go from here?
I don't think much of it at all. I think this is a common pleas court decision in Ohio's most liberal county, and I think eventually or pretty quickly it'll be struck down by either the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. We have no concerns about the constitutionality of school choice. And look, this is what voters have voted for. We have, parents want to be able to send their kids to the school of their choice. We're making that happen in this state. We have great public schools, but that's not the only game in town. And I think that this has been a 25, 30-year project, getting to the place where parents get to decide where they want their kids to go to school. And now we allow them to use some of their own tax dollars that are funding education to put that to some of their kids' own education as well. We're not losing much sleep over that decision.
Brian's also an attorney. So whenever you have a ruling like that, who has to appeal it to get another look at that?
So I believe the Attorney General's office they'll, as the attorney for the state of Ohio, they will defend the statutes that we have on the books. So this will go to the 10th District Court of Appeals. That is also in Franklin County. It's entirely in Franklin County. So, we're not exactly expecting a super friendly decision mm-hmm. there. But I think when the Ohio Supreme Court gets a look at this, we have a school funding system that involves property tax, but does not overly rely on property tax. Folks in Columbus, Columbus City Schools, the average student gets about we send about $26,000 a year mm-hmm. to Columbus City School District per student. In Tays Valley, where my kids go to school, it's more like $4,000. Yeah. So we've already made those adjustments and accounted for the fact that not every community has the same property values to underpin public education. Mm-hmm. We've had a system under Democrat and Republican presidents for 30 years since the Durolf decision that have all made tweaks, that have all made changes, that have all tried to get to the fairest way to fund our schools, and we think we've got that today.
Yeah. Looking at this from a legislator's point of view, and I know I've heard some of this argument over the years, agricultural communities, if that school district is heavily reliant on property taxes, depending on what kind of crops you got, per season, you may have the money or you may not to pay some of those property taxes.
Yeah, it's I've got a school district in Ohio's 12th that is considered on paper the ninth richest school district in Ohio. Now, they're not in terms of their household income. They're not even remotely close. But look, farmland's valuable. Prices have gone up. And so that is part of the issue with why we're trying to reform our property tax system is we have to have a way to account for these sort of unusual spikes. We need to have a system that is not penalizing communities for, being agricultural and having a lot of farmland. So, we have made numerous tweaks on transparency, on process, on empowering county budget commissions to reduce, the amounts collected from levies. This is a big issue. It's harder to turn you can't turn a battleship on a dime. We need to. It's going to take us a couple cycles here to get all these reforms to stack on top of themselves. But we feel really confident that by the time next year rolls around and people start to see those bills, we've given local governments the tools to reduce property tax burden, which is, again, where 100% of property tax goes to the local level. State gets $0 from property taxes. So we need to kind of push some of those tools to the local level so that the entities who are getting that money have the ability to say, hey, we have enough, and we want to be a partner with the state in providing some relief.
Of course, you have to deal with the here and now, but there's a candidate that's running for governor that has talked about the possibility of doing away with the state income tax. So have you even gotten that far down the road in your thinking as to what that might look like?
We have. I mean, I think that after this budget, we're going to have the second lowest flat tax in America. We're going to have the lowest income tax rate of any of our neighboring states. And this does matter when we're trying to attract businesses and companies. And, we have people fleeing other states, right? I mean, California and New York have a lot of outward migration. So long as folks leave their tax and spend policies where they left, we'd love those folks to come to Ohio. And we think that in this budget, we're kind of rolling out the welcome mat and saying, come get your share of the American dream in Ohio. We've got great cities. We've got rural communities. But yeah, I think that, Vivek Ramaswamy has certainly talked about eliminating the income tax. I think there's a view in the Republican legislature that we're not done yet. We certainly believe that we can continue to provide that relief to residents and provide services that people expect. And there's a decent chance I may be in this role again for the next budget for whoever the next governor is. And we're excited about new ideas.
Of course, you don't represent this Chillicothe per se, but I know you've seen the news about the paper mill that's going to close. Whether it's here with Pixel or another community that loses an institutional type industry that's been there for well over a century, the impact that has on a community, I know the state's been trying to work with the employees to find other jobs and things of that nature. Is there a need for something else of a safety net out there to help communities that lose legacy plants like this?
Well, I think, first of all, I know state government's working hard to either find, another operator for that facility, another large-scale employer, and I think that is the answer. I think that you are going to have, as time goes on, industries rise and industries fall. The question is, are we doing enough to get new large-scale employers to the state? I think we've had a lot of success there, right? There's no reason that the next Anduril that's coming to Pickaway County, that the next one can't come to Chillicothe. There's no reason that, Intel, that's going into Licking County, there is a lot of employers of that scale that we're still going after. And I think that's really the key is, certainly we need to have basic safety nets so that, and we do, whether unemployment and Jobs Ohio, and Ohio means jobs. There are hundreds and hundreds of, thousands of good-paying jobs on Ohio Means Jobs website that are available to go get. So we are working hard. Coming out of the last recession, I think we do a decent job of, kind of making sure people have opportunities. But we need to grow the whole kind of base in Ohio, and I think that the best way to kind of guard against, a plant closure is to have 3 more in the queue. that we can bring in that are going to be in those new industries that we need. And I think that Chillicothe, clearly has a 100, 200 year history of manufacturing and large scale employers that we're excited about what we can bring here.
You mentioned Anduril and also Intel. Of course, there's been a lot in the news about Intel. Is this actually going to happen because of some of their inner difficulties? But whether it's something like Intel or Anduril, what is drawing these multi-billion-dollar facilities to the state of Ohio?
Well, part of it's that tax environment that we talked about. I mean, we are very employer-friendly. We have abundant energy. We are working very hard to increase our energy generation. We got flat ground access to energy. We got a very talented, well-skilled workforce. We've got, and you have it all here in Ohio. If you want to be in the big city feel, Columbus is 45 minutes away. Yeah. If you want to have the rural feel, 10 minutes outside of Chillicothe and you're there. And so I think that we are well located. We have great people working. We have great schools, and we do have an environment that says we want people to come here. We want businesses locate here. Look what's happening in New York City. Right. They're not trying to welcome business to New York City. And so we're taking advantage of that and rolling out the welcome mat when other states are kind of slamming the door and making life tougher. And so we're pretty optimistic that can continue under our next governor as well, and really kind of get Ohio back into that driver's seat as a leader in the country.
Staying along that line, of course, a property owner has their right to sell their land. But I know over the last, probably going back to when Governor Voinovich was even in office, there has been a concern about losing what's known as prime agricultural land to, big business or big industry and things of that nature. Is there anything out there that says, hey, we need to take a closer look at, are we kissing off our agricultural community because it's prime farmland is being sold for something else?
I think, first of all, we have a lot of great farmland in Ohio. I remember we were kind of having the debate over solar, and we passed a bill to kind of for that reason. We gave counties the ability to say no to some of these large scale solar projects, and so that we preserve some of that farmland you're talking about. But I remember the metric being done that even if every single solar project in the queue were approved for Pickaway County, it would have amounted to like less than 1% of all the farmland in the county. Now, it's not insignificant, right, but I think we need, we are still going to be an agricultural powerhouse in the country here in Ohio. It's our number one industry. It's going to continue to be. That being said, I think that we know kind of where Ohio is likely to grow. And I think we know where it's not going to grow as fast. And so even in Pickaway County, which is now the second fastest growing county in Ohio, a lot of that growth is taking place in the northern part of the county. If you drive, 15 minutes south of the county line with Franklin County, you're still in farm country. Yeah. And I think that we're going to preserve that. We're not going to incentivize people to do projects where it doesn't make sense. And you do have a balance, but we also know that when Intel and Anduril come along, and you can employ 4,000 people, and that means building a factory on one piece of ground. We think those are the kind of decisions you have to be ready to make.
Speaking of big business coming in, I know there's a crush in your school district. Not trying to localize your politics because you're a state representative, but I know Teays Valley is under kind of a crunch right now. Where are we going to put all these people that are going to live here with a big plant like that coming in?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be, with those plants, though, comes new residents who pay school income tax, new residents who pay property tax, new facilities that pay a lot of property tax. I mean, the structure is there that when – I think there's this misconception that, Anduril comes to town and it's just like a net negative to the finances of the school district. That's just false. Yeah. There's going to be, pilot payments made to the school district. All of these if there's a subdivision built to house the workers, Those are all now taxpayers for the district. So, do we need to build another building or two? I mean, that's for the school board to decide and the residents to decide whether they want to support. But I'm not as pessimistic as some people get about the existing structures we have to accommodate. Part of why we're landing these projects is because we're well set up to do it. And I think that we need to view the glass as half full rather than half empty.
Lastly, couldn't get away without mentioning something in sports.
Sure.
The Cleveland Browns proposed stadium, that I think the budget is putting $600 million to that. If you would explain that the state's not the only ones that are proposing to put money into this project. The ownership is doing something too, but you don't seem to hear a lot about that.
No, I mean, look, there's a lot of kind of demagoguery around this one, but I'll say this is I believe, like a $2.4 billion project. The private owners, the team, they're putting in $1.2 billion, right? So that's half. Private investors for the apartments and the retail and all the surrounding facilities, they're in for another $600 million. So state government is in for about 25% of the overall project cost. That is a far smaller share than many other economic development projects that we do in this state, like Intel, like Androl, like the Fayette County Battery Plant. In those situations, the state may be giving incentives or tax credits that are worth more than 50% of the project. So at the end of this, Ohioans are going to have arguably the premier entertainment venue in all of America. If we are serious about increasing our population and growing and being on the cutting edge of what's happening in America and getting all those people who are fleeing other states and kind of reclaiming our place as a leader, then we got to be serious about what people want. And it's not just the tax structure, and it's not just the schools. It's some of those quality of life, amenity type things. I'm a Bengals fan.
I knew that.
All right. And we in the last round of this budget, we have an additional $400 million into the sports fund that all of these other teams and sports and cultural facilities can also go apply for. So we're not just taking care of the Browns. But when the Bengals went to the Super Bowl in 2021, all my friends and colleagues came back and said, my goodness, have you seen what this amazing stadium? Why don't we have that in Ohio? Why is our stadium so, mediocre compared to some of these other states? Well, now we have the opportunity. Now we have the opportunity to have exactly what people would like to have elsewhere. And I think it's like every other stadium we built in this state. People kind of gnash their teeth and, fret and clutch pearls over, the degree to which government was or was not involved. And then the ribbon gets cut. It's an amazing place to be. I think it's going to attract, we've been losing events to Indiana for 17 years. Indiana spent over $600 million 17 years ago. Yeah. And they've been eating our lunch when it comes to tourism and economic development ever since. Nobody in Ohio wrings their hands and say, I can't believe Indiana did that. We've been trying to beat them. Now we have the opportunity to do that. So, look, it's been a fun debate for 6 months, but I think when this facility is built and people realize what a draw it is and what a kind of a crown jewel for Northern Ohio it is, I think people are going to be happy it's here.
And speaking of your team, the Bengals just, I guess, inked the deal with Hamilton.
Right.
But that was all between Hamilton County and the Bengals ownership, right?
It is. Now, look, we've had discussions with them as well. I think it was just kind of a timing thing with the Bengals where, it's kind of hard to come in and make an ask as specific as Cleveland was able to make when you don't have a long-term lease in place, when you're having some back and forth with the county. But now that's all getting resolved. And so I think that the Bengals and Hamilton County deserve a lot of credit for getting this put together. And look, there's now an additional $400 million in that same sports and cultural facilities fund that the Browns are going to be appropriated out of that, Hamilton County and the Bengals can go apply for. And I think that the metrics for getting that, to make sure taxpayers are made whole, to make sure that the tax revenues we generate are enough to kind of pay us back as the taxpayers, that's all in place. Right. So the state of Ohio is going to make money on the Browns facility. The state of Ohio is going to make money on the Bengals staying in Cincinnati. And I expect probably in the next 6 months or so you will see The Bengals coming to the state in a similar way, and we've already have a pathway to participate in that project now.
Very good. Well, we appreciate your coming down and taking the time to explain the budget. Of course, as we're doing this show live, the governor has not yet signed the budget.
That's right.
That could happen anytime today.
No vetoes,
yeah.
Right?
All right. Brian, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Mike.
Again, State Representative Brian Stewart, our guest today on Special Edition, brought to you by Litter Quality Propane. I'm Mike Smith.